I want to talk about how you actually deal with social comparison in academia. This is a really challenging thing that many of us actually face. And as a professor, as a researcher, you're probably going to go through this, where you are going to think about yourself relative to other people. This is human nature, to go through social comparison and to think, how is it that they get something more than what I actually get? And so it's a really easy thing to get into because we have metrics. We are compared in terms of the productivity that we have, quote unquote productivity that we have, which is a false metric. But there is a lot in terms of how we compare ourselves and what we actually do when we see all of these things. And I want to talk about that today in terms of how we might process and think about this sort of social comparison. I actually don't like going onto social media. And believe it or not, I know that's kind of really funny. But part of the reason why I've started the Reciprocity Project is to put out positive messages and to get people to reflect on the fact that they're good people, no matter what. And part of the reason is whenever I go onto social media, if I go onto Facebook, I feel angry because there's some angry relative or long lost friend that is saying something that they probably shouldn't. If I go on to LinkedIn, for example, there's often how people are doing better than me. And it's not the fact that I can't celebrate them. That's not what I'm talking about. And in fact, I'm really often proud of what they actually do. It's the secondary emotion that you get, and it makes me reflect on how I have done poorly. And I think in terms of myself, why is it that I don't have those particular things? And why am I problematic? And why is it that I can't get to where they're going? And all of these things, what I've come to realize over many, many years now is that it's not a reflection. None of these things you can solve, right? There's no way to actually solve these things. What you're looking at are your traits and how you're different than somebody else. And what you're looking at is you are thinking in terms of market expectations. And those market expectations are making you think in terms of one way and what that actually looks like. But in reality, the market and our perceptions of the market are often really, really off. And the market doesn't necessarily understand what you're about, and you're not going to fit very well most of the time, and that includes everybody. You're not going to fit very well with the market. You're going to be outliers in different ways. If you have too many of this, people will say, well, you have too many of this. If you have too few of this, they're going to say you have too few of this. If you've got these kind of traits, they're going to say, well, you got these kinds of traits. You should have those kinds of traits. And ultimately, what you have to come down to and think about is that those are just your traits. And those traits are perfectly fine in terms of how they are and what you look like. And what you're reflecting on is how other people perceive what you're actually doing and judging you for stuff that you often can't change. That stuff that's outside of your control. Some of those things are, but many of those things aren't. Even the fact that you work hard and don't work hard, or that you take a lot of breaks or don't take a lot of breaks, are often outside of your control because you have your own psychological traits and your own biology that other people don't have. And they're looking at you based on their biology and how they actually behave in the world. And often, how the market reacts to you in those comments, those little tiny comments. And here's the thing. You might get 100 positive comments, and they're all wonderful. But one person can make you feel terrible inside and change you. And it's that one person that's often saying something because they're reflecting on their own stuff that they feel bad about. And so they project that onto you and they say, well, I feel bad about this inside and I am unable to admit it So I'm going to tell somebody else that I feel bad inside, and the way that I actually deal with this is I tear other people down. So I want you to reflect on this and think about many of the things that you have are just simply your traits. Where you grew up. Many of you grew up in places around the world that don't have the resources that other places have. Many of you have parents that don't have the resources that many other people have. Many of you don't have the characteristics that are considered the dominant in society today. So, those things change all the time. I think about even the fact of economic prosperity in different areas. You might be thinking, well, I'm not in this country. So, economic prosperity is changing very rapidly in many countries around the world. And in 20 years, you might be in the country that everybody wants to be in. And there's many countries that are doing that right now. I think about even the fact that, the notion that there is a dominant form of race today, which makes no sense, because there are often many races that are far more populous, which will likely become the dominant form at some point in the future. So any of these things that we think about, the fact that whatever you have, you name that thing, and you're feeling bad about it because of that particular trait, well, you know what you say? I'm proud of it. This is the thing that I feel good about. Turn it around and turn it into something that's empowering, where you turn it into, that's your thing. This is what I actually love. The fact that I can't sit down for a long, long time, and I've got to get up and I gotta go pee all the time. every hour, I gotta go do that. Well, I'm proud of that. That's my quirky thing. I'm proud of the fact that I've got a squeaky, squawky voice that people used to make fun of. When people call me, when telemarketers call me, I always know that they're a telemarketer because they always tell me, ma'am. These things that we think about, that these are problematic things that we should be upset about. In fact, those are just your traits. That's who you are. And yes, you can work on them. They do get better if you work on them, some of those things. But often, it's you just admitting to yourself that I have these traits. I can't change the fact that I'm male or female at this moment. Or if I feel one way or the other, I can't. I just have to accept myself for who I am and move forward and be proud of those kooky and unusual and fun, weird things that you have. Those are beautiful. Those are really beautiful. And you should be proud of those things, whatever those are. For me, it's my ears. People used to call me Radar in high school, which was a cruel name, and man, that hurt all the time. But whatever. That's my quirky thing that makes me me. And the fact that I was picked on in high school for being slow, being a loner, being any of those things, having big ears, well, I wouldn't have done this otherwise. I wouldn't be speaking openly about this otherwise. I wouldn't be in public. I wouldn't be who I am today without those experiences. Those are my traits that make me who I am. And I'm proud of them.